This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien starts today's show with a grain market update. He explains the current conditions and recaps the year for the grain markets while also looking ahead. Continuing the show is K-State Assistant State Climatologist Matt Sittel, looking back at the weather we have experienced this year. He also says how Kansas may finish December. A conversation with Fulton Valley Farms owner Betty Corbin about reindeer finishes this year's shows. She discusses how they care for their reindeer and the holiday magic they bring. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show with a grain market update. And as always, we're joined by K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Shelby.
Dan, kicking off our conversation with what are futures looking like?
Well, they've been following the same harvest low trend as they have been in the past month. There have been some ups and downs. We'd had a run-up in the last 2 weeks, on a comparative run-up on the corn market from about 470 or so, had jumped up to about 490 and now are back to about 470. So, again, that continues the pattern of about where we're at to slightly trending lower if you draw a beeline through it or a ray through it from early November. And for wheat, we had jumped up from about $6 up to $6.75. Now closed here about midweek, about $6.25 or so. So, again, we're just about in the middle of that trading range. No new news yet, or if there is news out there, which I think there are things that after the first of the year, as we go further into the year, that the markets have to deal with. But at this time coming into the holidays, they're really not doing a whole lot, just kind of going sideways. And then for soybeans, we had gotten down to about $13.85, $13.90 thereabouts, jumped up to about $13.40, and now here recently closing somewhere $13 to $13.10 thereabouts. Again, not a lot of excitement. There are a lot of things, a lot of unanswered questions that the markets will have to deal with after the first of the year. It seems that absent anything catastrophic, we're probably feeding right into the mode of a lot of traders not wanting to be in open positions, not wanting to be highly at risk going into the holidays. And so I think that plays somewhat into what we're seeing right now in the grain markets on the future side. And
as we are going into the holidays, what are we seeing on the cash side of things?
Still, ethanol cash prices for corn in Kansas averaging over $5. The only state in the country where that's at. In the western Iowa, they're at $4.74, $4.73 in eastern part of the state, and about $4.70 or so in Nebraska. So our situation here is that, again, we had probably in the western part of the state where some of those ethanol plants are at, we had dry weather early. It probably affected us a fair amount in terms of production. So I guess we can be thankful for, if you're a Kansas farmer with corn to sell, that the ethanol plant prices are, again, sitting at about $5. That compares to a lot of cash prices that are generally running about, well, on the low side, about $4.55, $4.59 or so in Topeka, Salina, Columbus areas, and jumping up higher to $4.90 thereabouts in Garden City and Hutchinson and Colby in between. Grain sorghum prices still running higher. And again, and you can see it, we've had now the second consecutive week of grain sorghum export shipments, not just purchases, but shipments over 10 million bushels. And so here we're about 15, 16 weeks into the marketing year, about 28, 30% of the way through, and we've got forward sales for about 66% of the way to the USDA's projection. So if there's a kind of a quiet, bright light in Kansas grain markets, it would be what's happening with these grain sorghum exports. And of course, the main buyer of exports on the world, of grain sorghum exports in the world markets would be China. So there you go. Soybeans kind of up and down, again, in the same manner that the futures are up. We see cash prices, all of them in the range of $12.04 on the bottom in the Colby area to $13.18 in Hutchinson, one or two bids. So somebody must be filling a train, doing something, filling unit train, shuttle trains in that area. But all the other prices around the state, at least the top prices that we see, all below 13 other than that Hutchinson bid standing out. And for wheat prices, again, as we've tailed off some in the wheat market, we do see three areas of the state, the same three export-oriented areas, and where some of the mills are in Salina, Topeka, and Hutchinson, where we're at $6 to $6.04 on the high side. But where we don't have that, we're at, say, $5.46 in the Colby area, $5.65, and Garden City, and $5.74 in Columbus. So, we're in a situation where people typically are, and at the end of a marketing year, some have a motivation to hold on to grain, to not sell it until after the first of the year. Some of them have taken out, I've heard discussion of farmers having taken out price later contracts, which can work fine as long as the elevator doesn't go under. So delayed sales, more grain on the market after the first, and there may be some because of tax issues that want to sell before the end of the year. And one thing that we're just not seeing right now is a lot of grain being held off the market, forcing strength now at the end of the year coming into December 31st. So the droughts we've had the last couple of years, short inventories, probably are affecting things and affecting some of that flow of grain. I still think, we take a longer term view of things. It's good to kind of figure out how we got to this situation and where we might be going next year.
And thinking about how we did get to this situation, this is our last grain market update for 2023. And so, Dan, could you recap some of the things that have happened this year?
We had strength in the corn market, jumped up to as high as about $6.35, $6.37 in early June. Had optimism in terms of the size of the crop coming into April and May. Then hot weather and combination of market factors took us way high. Then we very volatilely bounced lower all the way down to about $4.90, back up to $5.80. And after that, and that $5.80 was in mid-late July, early August. And after that, though, we haven't seen any significant recovery. So from, I guess the markets began the year at about 610. We're ending at about 467. Big issue there is a 15.3 billion bushel corn crop. And the markets take that the 2.1 billion bushels of ending stocks are enough to keep us from really being that worried about things, at least for right now. And there's also the question, soybean market, how did we get here? We, again, had corn had followed soybeans down lower into early June, and again, that had gotten down to about 1150. Markets wildly optimistic of where things were going, and plus you add to that strong Brazilian, South American soybean crop. Brazil in particular had jumped up on weather concerns all the way up to about 1450, and then in a kind of a tortured up and down path have worked our way down to about 1308 now. So we started the year at about $14, are ending the year at about $13. After all of that volatility, for the wheat market, we were holding up really very good in the wheat market. In hindsight, gosh, $7.50 on the low, at least for the March contract, $7.50 on the low side, $7.40 as high as $9.25. All that happened prior to July. But once we came off those July highs, we've just been on almost a 45-degree lower line heading down from basically $7.75, $7.50 thereabouts down to as low as $6. And after we hit that $6, it seemed that the market has said, okay, no mas, no more, and we're going pretty much sideways. Big issues in the market, in the wheat market, have been just lack of exports. We have strong competition from the Black Sea region, very low. Weaker currencies, and the U.S. dollar being as it is has really worked against U.S. wheat exports, especially for what we grow in Kansas, the hard red winter wheat varieties.
And are we seeing any optimism when we head into 2024?
I think that you have to be careful about saying whether the market's paying attention to things or not. But in my view, I think we have some real unresolved issues. And about 4 of them. One would be the extreme dryness in the U.S. Not so much for us. We're dry at different places. We've got some rain of late. But the Eastern Corn Belt, even the major ag meteorologists are talking about how we are historically dry in these areas. We do have, if you look at the latest El Nino advisory, the El Nino is expected to continue through the northern hemisphere winter with a transition of ENSO neutral, which means basically we'd be moving out of it, to a neutral situation April through June. So as the markets are low right now, they must be banking on the situation that, as latest weather forecaster, climatological forecasters have talked about, that come spring, we get into April, May, June, we'll get more moisture, and the dry conditions we have now won't hold. That won't help necessarily Brazil. They're central, northern Brazil, extremely dry right now. That'd be the third factor that's out there that, gracious, they're at risk to have some real crop shortfalls. Of course, they're not anxious to talk about that, no more than anybody else is. But I've read, as I understand it, what's going on right now during December and January is really the key time for Brazilian crop size, and they're just really, really dry at the moment. And, they're betting that moisture forecasts of what could happen will happen, when they don't, we run back up. And I'd say the fourth is that when we come to that January 12th USDA set of reports, again, there'll be a WASDE report, a final crop production report for 2023. There'll be a stocks report. There'll be wheat seedings, wheat canola seedings, a whole bunch of things happening that in that, probably assuming there are no changes in the USDA production estimates for 2023, it seems that we're having pretty good pace of usage on these crops. Again, strong crush for soybeans, have been pretty strong ethanol usage for corn. We'll see what feed usage is coming out of the quarterly stocks report. So we've got some positive things happening on the use side that if they come about like we're thinking, they'll tighten up ending stocks and make things a little bit more scarce in the grain markets, and probably see some strength thereafter. Anyway, Shelby, that's my thought on where we could be going after the first of the year.
That was K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Friday show doing a look at the weather in 2023. And to talk about it, we're joined by K-State Assistant State Climatologist Matt Sittel. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Matt, as we take a look back at the weather, starting in March and looking through May, and it was pretty dry in some parts of Kansas. It
absolutely was. I think the big story in terms of weather for the year was the drought. And as you mentioned, March through May was when things were really bad, especially in central and eastern Kansas. 4 of our 9 climate divisions in the state ranked in the top 10 driest meteorological springs. And that's the 3-month period between March, April, and May. So 4 divisions out of 9 in the state, top 10 driest. We had 3 counties in the state that had their driest meteorological spring on record. Those are Harvey, Greenwood, and Butler counties, which all happen to be adjacent to one another. Down in south central Kansas. Now, when I say driest ever, that's driest on record. It's a 129-year period of record that began in 1895. The agency, the National Centers for Environmental Information, started tracking divisional and state averages back in 1895. So driest 129 years, that's a big deal.
Didn't stay dry for everyone, however. Looking in May, got some wet weather in southwest Kansas.
That's true. I think the biggest story, in my opinion, related to the drought was that southwest Kansas in the period of 3 months went from being in severe drought to being drought-free, where southwest Kansas in early May, a lot of D3 and D4 on the U.S. drought monitor. It was completely gone by the end of July. It was the 4th wettest May through July on record in southwest Kansas.
Overall, for the first half of the year, how would you describe the weather for Kansas?
How would I describe it? Well, it was really a tale of 2 extremes, where we had all of the drought in western Kansas in 2022, and eastern Kansas was wet. It flipped around to where southwest Kansas was the wet area, and then eastern Kansas really was pretty dry. Because when we look at the end of the year, and we still got a little bit of time, of course, to go in December, most of the divisions in the state are going to be below normal for the year. Southwest Kansas is really the lone exception to the rule because of all the precipitation that they had, especially in that May through July time frame.
Sounds like some Kansas weather, and something else also coming with Kansas, heat waves.
That is true. Another of the significant events, we really had two different events. There were two heat waves that were brutal. There was late July. The dates were July 24th through August 3rd, and then again from the 19th through the 25th. And that second heat wave was the worst of the two. We had 7 consecutive days in that the average high temperature across the state was over 100 degrees. And the first day, that is kind of unusual, the first day of that heat wave was the worst day. That was August the 19th when Manhattan at the airport hit 115 degrees. That ended up being the hottest temperature in the nation on that day. And it was the warmest temperature in over a decade recorded anywhere in the state of Kansas.
We still don't know if we're going to have a white Christmas. However, many people in Kansas were really close to having a white Thanksgiving.
Yes, that was a really interesting event that took place. Up to 14 inches of snow in parts of central Kansas right there on the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, which caused a lot of problems for people who were traveling. For example, the K-State football game, I'm sure some people saw that, was a snow fest. But it turned out that snow event was the biggest single storm in over a decade in places like Wichita and Topeka, as well as in Manhattan, where there was 6 to 8 inches of snow in all 3 of those locations. So really unusual. It was more snow from that one event than we had all of last winter. We only had about 3 inches of snow for the entire winter here in Manhattan last year. So just a complete surprise to have that much snow and to have it really as early. And we can't even call November winter because meteorologically speaking, we don't consider winter to begin until December 1st. So it really was a late fall snowstorm.
Did that help contribute to getting some moisture back in the ground, though, for Kansas?
It absolutely did. The good news about having a snow event that early in the year prior to winter is the ground was not frozen. So as that snow began to melt, it was able to soak into the ground, which was great news. If you get a storm in the middle of, say, January and the ground's frozen, when it melts, it doesn't necessarily get into the ground. So this was a good way of having a snow event, to have one early in the year that melts and then provided really badly needed moisture. And then we moved into December.
And as we hit December, we got some really good rains in parts of Kansas.
We certainly did. The event that just happened last week, from Wednesday through Friday, that was the 13th through the 15th, huge amounts of moisture in southwest Kansas. The highest report for that storm was over 3.5 inches down in Meade County, which is down in southwest Kansas. There was a location in Ford County that had more precipitation in the 24-hour period from 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. on the 14th into the 15th. It was the largest single-day rain event ever in the month of December at that location, over a century of data. So we're talking just an incredibly unusual event.
Was southwest Kansas the only place in Kansas that saw rain, or were there other parts that also saw a little bit of moisture?
Well, eastern Kansas didn't see nearly as much, but the main area of moisture was running from roughly Smith Center down through Russell and Hayes, on down through Dodge City, and then down to Ashland and Meade in that area, where that whole area got between 1.5 and 2.5 inches of rain, with that isolated highest amounts closer to the Oklahoma border.
I feel like this year we've talked a lot about the La Nina to El Nino transition, and is that something we're still seeing?
Right. Yeah. If you recall, the 3 winters prior to this one was something that folks coined a triple dip La Nina. That means we had 3 consecutive winters in which there was a La Nina. And a La Nina means there were colder than normal sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific. Now we flipped around, and this winter is an El Nino winter. Now, an El Nino winter is good news for Kansas because of 2 things. Most importantly, we tend to have above normal precipitation. There's a tendency towards above normal temperatures. And what we're seeing this December is really the signature of what happens during an El Nino event. This rain event in southwest Kansas, for example, large amounts of precipitation, which is what we tend to see during an El Nino. And now we're coming up on Christmas week, and I know a lot of people are hoping, can we get a white Christmas out of that? And unfortunately, because of warmer than normal temperatures that we've had this month, I don't see it happening.
And are those warmer than normal temperatures looking to maybe set some interesting records for Manhattan?
It's certainly possible for not only Manhattan, but for all of the state. Right now, we've still got over a week to go, so things can change. But so far in December, the state is running on average about 6 degrees above normal for the month. if we finish that far above normal, it's going to be potentially one of the top 5 warmest Decembers on record. And again, that's over that 129 period that I mentioned before. Not only that, some locations, specifically southwest Kansas, is looking at having one of its top 5 wettest Decembers as well, which would be kind of unusual to have both of them happen. But that precipitation in southwest Kansas was so unusual. That one event alone produced enough precipitation to where it could be a top 5 wettest December. That's how unusual that system was.
And so what do we see as we get close to this last week of 2023?
Well, right now, the question before about whether or not there is going to be a white Christmas, the models are having trouble figuring out what's going to happen. There's a couple of scenarios. The 2 main models that folks look at, there's a European model, which is abbreviated the ECMWF, and then there's an American model known as the GFS. Well, right now, those 2 models are in complete disagreement. They have totally different scenarios as to what's going to happen as we move into Christmas Eve and into the days following Christmas. The European model favors some colder air to finally show up. Not bitter cold, mind you. We're talking about really closer to normal, something we haven't been this month. Whereas the American model says, I think it's going to be a period of rain, and then we're going to swing back around to warmer temperatures again. Now, that rain's really important because parts of eastern Kansas, which missed out on this big event earlier in the month that southwest Kansas had, the American model thinks there could be as much as 2 inches of rain, if not more, in the eastern 1/4 of Kansas, to include Topeka, Manhattan, as well as the Kansas City metro area, which would be welcome precipitation, but and then that's going to really push Kansas potentially towards a top 10 wettest December for the whole state, not just for southwest Kansas. And again, that's what happens in an El Nino year. That's kind of what we expect. So hopefully here in the next day or two, these models are going to figure out what the solution is. In time, they will converge to a solution eventually. We're still waiting for that because this precipitation event is still 3 to 5 days away.
If people would like to keep up to date with weather that's happening, how can they do that from a K-State resource?
Well, the Kansas Mesonet is a great resource that we have. We have over 85 towers scattered across the state, and if they would like to see the numbers in action, you can get real-time data on that website. It's mesonet.k-state.edu.
That was Kansas State University Assistant State Climatologist Matt Sittel. I will link the Mesonet in today's show notes on agtoday.net, or you can also find it by going to mesonet.ksu.edu. That is mesonet.ksu.edu. I would like to let you know that this will be our last show for 2023, as we will not be running any shows over the holiday season, but we'll be back with you on January 2nd in 2024, which means if you'd like to, you can catch up on past shows, which you can always find on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we'll be joined by Betty Corbin to talk about reindeer. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Friday show getting into the Christmas spirit a little bit more. And then to help us get into the Christmas spirit, we're joined by owner-operator of Fulton Valley Farms, Betty Corbin. Betty, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And Betty, today, something special at Fulton Valley Farms. You guys have reindeer, and where are these reindeer from?
We do have real live registered North American reindeer. Researched them, and then we found these reindeer out of Pennsylvania. And there are a lot of reindeer farms in the northeast part of the country. And because the animals are a tundra animal, they're used to the cold, they need the cold, and so it's very difficult to keep them in this far south. But we did find them out of Pennsylvania and got them brought in.
So what is it like dealing with them, because they do prefer that cold weather?
You know, you would think that reindeer are tough because they come from the tundra, and they do have to be tough to survive there. But when you think about having them here in Kansas and the temperatures get up to 100 degrees plus, it is difficult to keep them. We have tried to breed them, and it doesn't work because we think the heat takes a toll on them. We try real hard to keep them cool. We keep them under misters. We keep them under shade, and they seem to be surviving real well. It's just a matter of we do kind of baby them along.
And what is it like taking care of a reindeer versus maybe taking care of traditional livestock like a cow?
Well, they are a ruminant animal, just like a cow. They have a high-dollar diet of high grain and protein, and they are not difficult to keep. They are just temperamental. We have to be very, very careful of them. They shed their coats, which, we don't care if cattle shed their coats, but they shed their coats and they get hairballs, kind of like a cat does. We have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of the different diseases. We have to keep them totally separate from all other animals. We have to keep them on high fences. We don't want them mingling with the local deer. There's all kinds of regulations that we have to adhere to in order to keep the reindeer.
What reindeer do you have and how many are there?
We have 3 head, and we have what we call a traveling squad. We have Itsy Bitsy, who's our very big veteran. She's been with us over 9 years. And then we have Sparkle, who's been with us about 3 years. And then we have Jelly Bean, who stays here on the farm and doesn't do any traveling because we got her when she was older, and we haven't been able to gentle her down as well as we would like to have her in public.
At Fulton Valley Farms, create a full Christmas experience. And so how do you see the reindeer support the holiday season?
They go all over the region. We have trailers designed for the reindeer because they have to have taller roofs because of the reindeer antlers. Little details like that make a big difference for the reindeer. We're very cognizant of how much they travel, and we do a good job of trying to keep them healthy. We even take our own water because sometimes they can't digest the water where they're at.
So what makes the reindeer special?
They are magical. People ask us, do they fly? And we go, well, we don't know for sure because we're not with them 24/7, but we do know that they bring out the child in each and every one of us, no matter how old we are or how young. People's eyes just light up and they go, oh my gosh, they're reindeer. They're real reindeer. And that's a really amazing and a fun thing to be a part of.
What is your favorite fun fact about the reindeer that you wish more people knew?
One of the things that we talk about the most is that it's the females that are pulling the sleigh through the world on Christmas Eve. And the reason we know that is because the female reindeer is the only species of deer that has antlers and shed them every year, just like the males do. So they shed their antlers in January or after Christmas, and the males shed their antlers in the fall right after the rut. So we have to conclude that if they have antlers on them, they are the ones that are pulling the sleigh. And that's why Rudolph has nubbins, because he's already shed his little baby antlers and is getting his second group in.
Betty, if people would like to find out more about your reindeer, where can they do that?
They can do it on our website at www.Fulton Valley Farms or www.Reindeer, and then they can call. We just love to talk to people, and we have the best time talking about reindeer.
Betty, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about reindeer.
Thank you. We are real proud of our reindeer. They do make a lot of people smile and a lot of people laugh, and that's what it's all about at this time of the year. We want to wish everybody out there a very, very happy holiday.
Happy holidays to you as well, Betty. That was owner-operator of Fulton Valley Farms, Betty Corbin. I will post the websites that she mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, and we'll be back with you after the holidays on January 2nd.